Miss Raguso here again with Schooled. Today we're going to read 4 chapters. If you remember, we last left off with Cap when he had just figured out what a check was and had bought a sparkly bangle for Sophie to make her feel better. Chapter 17 is told from Mrs. Donnelly's point of view, so we're going to pick up there. I left 4 messages for Frank Casigi before he finally called me back. He was apologetic. Sorry, Flora, you know I'm chairing the principal's conference this year, and it's just details. Sorry to bother you when you're so busy. I thought I'd check up on Cap Anderson. He has been fitting in any better? Fitting into what? He asked. The age of Aquarius? I felt my heart sink. That bad, huh? Actually, not really. I had the boy pegged as a train wreck, but considering how odd he is and how sheltered his life has been, things could have been a lot worse. He has friends? I asked hopefully. Not friends exactly. More like followers. Ever since that stunt with the school bus, the kids just flocked to him. He put together a tie-dyeing clinic with the art teacher. You wouldn't believe the turnout. It was, he chuckled, what'd they call big events back in the 60s? A happening, I supplied automatically. Right. And that's the least of it. He picks up a guitar in the music room and strums a few old Beatles tunes, and pretty soon he's got 20 people in there singing along. He's running some kind of martial arts class on the front lawn. He's got more kids working on the Halloween dance than will probably come that night. He's even got a few meditators. If I didn't know this kid's history, I'd probably have the police making sure he wasn't setting up a cult. It triggered an explosion of images from my own childhood at Garland. Cult was exactly the word for it, with Rain as its philosopher/guru. Still, the news made me breathe easier. That's a load off my mind. When I found out they made him 8th grade president, well, Sophie filled me in on what that meant. I've heard those rumors too, he admitted. It certainly hasn't gone smoothly for the last few in that office. But we don't want to be the only middle school in America with no student government. So we threw the dice, and this time we lucked out. Thank heaven. But maybe I should have realized that Cap was holding his own in his new life. He was still a fish out of water, but he didn't seem to be quite so thrown by every little thing as he had been when I first brought him home. One major clue was the fact that he was taking a genuine interest in that school. As a social worker, I kept current yearbooks from all the buildings in my district. Not only was Cap borrowing the Claveridge books, but he was spending hours studying them. Imagine a boy who had never seen a single classmate now wanting to know about more than 1,000 of them. I found it heartwarming. Things were even thawing slightly between Cap and my daughter. Mind you, that had to do more with the change in Sophie than a change in Cap. She was in a better state of mind because her father had finally remembered to send back her extremely belated birthday present, duly engraved. Truth be told, I never expected to see it again, and I didn't think Sophie had either. So imagine my surprise when she opened a padded mailer with no return address and pulled out that silver bangle. There was no card, not even a scribbled note. The only thing that spoke for this gift was the engraving on the inside of it. All you need is love. To be honest, the inscription threw me a little. It certainly didn't sound like Bill Donnelly, at least the one I used to be married to. His idea of sentimentality was the presentation of the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the Super Bowl. But I guess he could still surprise me. He certainly got this one right. Sophie was thrilled. It almost made up for the fact that he had walked out of her life yet again. Even with the new, kinder, gentler Sophie, Cap was still a whole lot nicer to her than she was to him. He probably had a crush on her. An attractive high school girl had to look good to an 8th grader, especially one who had barely laid eyes on a female who wasn't his grandmother. I couldn't prove that, of course, but one day I came home from work and the two of them were on the couch in front of Trigonometry and Tears, that awful teen soap opera geared to the interest level of chimpanzees and various species of plant life. A steamy makeout scene was taking place on the screen. Sophie was watching it intently, and more to the point, Cap was watching Sophie. He was a difficult one to read, but I believed he was trying to work up the guts to lean over and put his arm around her. So I slammed my briefcase down on the kitchen counter and said the one thing I could think of. Who's up for a nice glass of lemonade? Mother, Sophie exclaimed in exasperation. What century is this? I told myself I was protecting my daughter, but the truth is I was protecting Cap from what Sophie would have done to him if he'd made a move on her. The pain of my own adjustment from Garland was decades in the past, but it felt like yesterday when I watched this poor little boy. I took Frank Casigi at his word when he said Cap was doing well. But I knew I wouldn't sleep at night until he was once again with Rain, hobbling back towards the 60s as fast as her pinned hip would carry both of them. All right, chapter 18, we are now going to hear from Hugh Winkleman. I was the first dropout from Cap's morning Tai Chi group, literally. Not that I'd ever been a star of the class. 2 left feet weren't exactly an asset in martial arts. But I was Cap's friend, as much as it was possible to get close to someone like him. I wore my tie-dyes proudly, secure in the knowledge that I had more right than anybody. After all, who hung out with Cap before he ever drove a bus or mastered a dance? So there I was, waving my arms and hopping around like a turkey amped up on Mountain Dew, when the planted foot was kicked out from under me. It was so sudden, so devastating, that to this day I have no idea who did it to me. Daryl Pennifield was my prime suspect, because he was close by, but I didn't catch him in the act. 1 minute I was upright, the next I was on the grass, rolling. To the other kids in the group, it must have looked like I just vanished into thin air. Were my deepest, darkest fears coming true? This was a great school year because Cap was taking the heat off me, but he wasn't a target anymore. Target, heck, he was practically a celebrity. It was the bus driving thing that started it. When your whole world is a cheesy, pre-packaged rehearsal for being alive, like middle school, a kid your own age who can pilot a 20-ton bus is impressive. But the fact that he saved somebody's life, obviously. Now people were treating the 8th grade president like an 8th grade president. Someone who was admired and popular, a student leader who took an active role in the school. And that was great, for Cap. But what did it mean for me? Was I back in the crosshairs because he was out of them? Only time would tell. Of all the newly minted Cap fans, the biggest surprise had to be Naomi Erlanger. She was with that whole Zach Powers crew, and not a hanger-oner either. She was part of the inner circle, Lena's best friend. That was royalty around here. Needless to say, I didn't know her well. Steering clear of that crowd was a good way to avoid being dangled by my ankles over a toilet bowl. But I'd never heard that she'd had a big crush on Zach. But I had heard that she had a big crush on Zach. And let's face it, if the rumor had made it down to my lowly rung on the ladder, you had to figure it was all over the school. So what was her sudden fascination with Cap? She was star pupil of his Tai Chi group. She was constantly turning up at his locker to show him a new peace sign bracelet she'd bought, or a magazine article on Vietnam, or the Beatles, or anything about the 60s. Come to think of it, hers had been the first face at the door after the PA announcement on tie-dyeing day. The 8th grade wing was on the opposite end of the building from the art room. She must have sprinted the entire distance. Of course, she was one of the beautiful people, so when I spotted her, flanked by Lena and Daryl coming down our way in the hall, I was on my guard. "Hi, Cap," Naomi greeted us. Another thing about Naomi, I was invisible to her. Either that, or I was like Cap's pet ferret, a subhuman companion undeserving of attention. "We're walking in the March for Caring this weekend. We need sponsors." Daryl looked me up and down, a threatening expression on his face. "It's for a real good cause." I pulled a pair of crumpled dollar bills from my pocket. It made no difference to me if the money was going to support throwing puppies off 30-story office towers. This wasn't a charitable donation. I was purchasing wedgie insurance, and Daryl was Allstate. "Sorry, it can't be more." With a grunt of acknowledgement, Daryl snatched the money out of my hand and passed it on to Lena. Naomi's worshipful eyes never left the 8th grade president. "What do you say, Cap?" He took out the checkbook and began writing on it. I frowned. "Isn't that the school's money?" Mr. Kasigi said, "Spend it responsibly. What could be more responsible than giving to a charity?" "Paying for the dance," I replied. "That's what it's supposed to be for." He was serene. "I've been inside that bank, Hugh. They've got plenty of money for everything." He tore off the check and handed it to Naomi. She took one look at it and let out a shriek that raised the roof clean off the school. Lena gawked over her shoulder. $1,000? What? I wheeled on Cap. "Are you nuts? You can't give away that much." "Rain says there should be no limit on giving," he lectured. "Only taking. She's not the one Mr. Kasiji's going to strangle," but my words were lost in the excited buzz as students flocked around to investigate the source of Naomi's scream. Lena took the check from her and held it up to the crowd. There were oohs and ahs. "You're awesome, Cap," Naomi cried emotionally. "Awesome." Daryl nodded fervently. "You're the man." Suddenly, everybody was clapping and cheering. I was blown away. Not one of those idiots had the faintest idea that Cap's donation came straight out of the budget for the Halloween dance. I wanted to scream, "Look at the check! The school's name is printed right on it. This money is yours, mine, all of ours." That was when I experienced a moment of stunning understanding. Popularity had nothing to do with the truth. If these kids took a minute to ask themselves where Cap got off writing $1,000 checks, they'd be rioting, not applauding. But what really mattered was image. The 8th grade president was a star now. Nobody questioned it when he did something wonderful because that's exactly what they expected of him. All the adulation must have been overwhelming to someone like Cap, who was so accustomed to peace and quiet. He pushed his way through a barrage of high fives and ducked into the bathroom. I followed him, struggling with my own feelings about this. I wanted to be happy for the guy, but why? Because he did something stupid? His entire rise to fame seemed bizarre, random, dumb. "Must be nice," was all I could think to mutter. "It is nice," he agreed in wonder. "I couldn't have imagined how good it feels when so many people like you." I recoiled as if he'd slapped me. Being liked was a feeling I didn't know, that I might never know, and to have that rubbed in my face by one of the kindred spirits, the only person around who was more of an outsider than I was, it was the ultimate insult. I didn't care if he grew up on Pluto, let alone some hippie commune. To say that to me, someone who'd never experienced a popular minute, much less a popular day, was beyond cruel. Nothing could have made me feel worse than I did in that instant. The door was flung mightily open, and into the boys' room burst Naomi, her face pink with daring. She threw her arms around Cap and pressed a long kiss right on his mouth. Cap was so shocked that he crumpled against the stall door when she let go. "To be continued," she said meaningfully, and ran out of the bathroom. I glowered at him through eyes that were barely slits. Hero status wasn't good enough for him anymore. He had to be a heartthrob too. I was finished with Capricorn Anderson. Chapter 19, we are now at the point of view of Zach Powers. I saw a show last night with a bunch of scientists arguing over what the signs will be when the world is coming to an end. They talked about asteroids, volcanoes, and melting ice caps. Small minds. When Cap Anderson becomes the most popular, happening kid at C Average Middle School, that's the end of the world. Especially when you consider that that guy replaced me. It was all because of that stupid dance. How could a hippie who knew less than nothing about parties organize the middle school bash of everyone's dreams? "It's your own fault," Lena accused. "You recruited half the school to bug him, and you turned them into an army of volunteers." She had a point. With the exception of me and the hairball in chief, everyone was working on the Halloween dance, even the cool people. Daryl was hauling huge rolls of construction paper to the decorations people in the art room. Naomi was designing reflective mobiles to hang on from the basketball hoops. Lena was on the committee to cover the bleachers with orange and black bunting. Even cheap paper chains were impressive when you had 1,100 kids stringing them. "This is going to be the greatest party we've ever had," Naomi enthused. "I'll bet we get 1,000 kids." "And that's just the planning committee," I added sourly. "What's wrong with that?" "Ignore him," Lena put in. "He's in mourning because he thinks Cap stole his year." "Our year," I corrected, "and he's making it into 1967. "You shouldn't be so hard on Cap," Daryl told me. "Sure, he's weird, but he's the best 8th grade president we've ever had." "8th grade president isn't a real job," I seethed. "It's a joke, remember?" "Well, maybe it started that way," Naomi said earnestly, "but Cap Anderson is the most amazing person I've ever known." I snorted. Anybody can be amazing handing out $1,000 checks. Now that had caught me off guard. What was with that and all that charity? He gave $800 to the food drive in the cafeteria, $500 to cancer research, the same to Alzheimer's disease. They may have called it the March of Dimes, but that didn't stop Cap from forking over 65. They even stuck checks into the slots of those cans designed for people to drop their spare change. Mr. Kasigi had to be behind it somehow. Cap wouldn't be allowed to throw around big chunks of school money without permission from the office. Maybe the whole thing was a lesson about philanthropy. It bugged me. The 8th grade president wasn't supposed to set a good example. His job was to make an idiot out of himself and have a nervous breakdown. But no, the assistant principal had to set Cap up for sainthood. Whatever Kasigi was thinking, If he was thinking. I was the one paying the price. I was spending more and more of my time arguing with my friends, and all because of that hairball. My year. Yeah, right. More like my minute. How do you think I felt at lunch on Tuesday when I walked out of the food line with my tray and found Cap Anderson at my table, in my seat? Okay, it was a big cafeteria, but I'd been working my way up to that position since the first day of sixth grade. It hadn't taken me more than 30 seconds to look around the room and know that this was the place where the masters of the universe ate their tuna fish sandwiches. It was near the wall of the windows, but not so close as to get too hot on sunny days. Yet at the end of the period, a shaft of light always seemed to shine down like a spotlight on the person sitting in the end chair. My chair. At least until today. Those filtered rays were shining now on the haystack of Sasquatch hair. I stared at Darryl. The gutless wonder wouldn't even look me in the eye. He was concentrating on the exit sign over the door, which may or may not have been a message for me to get out. Naomi was focused on Cap, which meant nobody else in the building existed. Lena was the only one with the nerve to face me. Her look plainly announced that not only had I lost my spot, but I wasn't welcome to pull up a chair and squeeze in either. Fuming, I turned away. Crash. It was a tray-to-tray collision. My split pea soup sloshed onto his egg salad sandwich. His tater tots flipped into my banana cream pie. His Snapple tipped over, raining down on my shoes. I stared at the idiot as iced tea soaked into my socks. The last person I wanted to see. Hugh Winkleman. He stood frozen with fear, probably straining all those math brain cells to calculate how big a wedgie he'd just earned himself. Let me tell you, he should have been thinking huge. I had half a mind to stick a booster rocket under his waistband and launch it into orbit. You! And then I took in the expression on his face, and it was like looking in a mirror. He was staring at the hippie friend, who now had no time for him, and I was staring at my friends. Same story. In a way, it was more depressing than anything that had happened so far. I, Zach Powers, had something in common with this loser that had to be rock bottom. Still, there was only one other person in the whole school who was as disgusted as I was by this hippie mania, and that person had just dropped his lunch on me. Sorry, he said nervously. I felt an odd rush of emotion. It wasn't affection, trust me, but Hugh represented an earlier time at the school, before the space capsule landed and barfed up Cap Anderson, a time when things made sense. Hugh was the one who should have been 8th grade president all along. Heck, if I'd met Cap 24 hours later, it probably would have happened exactly the same way. Then this would still be my year, and Cap would be nothing more than a walking bad hair day nobody really knew. Don't worry about it, I told Hugh. Listen, we've got to talk. He looked so suspicious that I felt a pang of remorse for the mean things I'd said and done to him since kindergarten. In all the years I'd known him, we'd never had a conversation that hadn't been a sham to lure him through a door with a bucket of ice water balanced on top. Sure, he was suspicious. Wouldn't you be? About Capricorn Anderson, I elaborated, and everything that's been going on. Hugh expanded his tunnel vision on Cap to include an inventory of the guy's table mates. He sneered at me. Oh ho ho, looks like somebody's been replaced. I swallowed my pride. You'll notice Cap isn't hanging with you anymore. I was his friend when no one else would talk to him, Hugh said resentfully, when you and your cronies were trying to ruin his life. Well, whatever we were plotting, it obviously didn't happen. He's practically the king of the school. Hugh nodded slowly. I don't like it either. It doesn't have to be this way, I pressed on. He rounded on me. You are such a jerk. Whoever told you that the whole world performs according to your instructions? That's what started this whole mess. You trying to make poor Cap dance to your tune. I don't remember you warning the guy off when we nominated him 8th grade president, I snarled. Because I was grateful the nominee didn't turn out to be me. I pounced on this. So you let Cap swallow the hook. Now who's the manipulator? You're just as guilty as I am. Maybe so, but I'm not stupid, he said hotly. Making Cap your victim blew up in your face. Now you want him out so you can stick me in his place. It's not like that, I pleaded. Look, Cap's president. We're stuck with that. But there's still time to puncture the tires of this bandwagon before the Halloween dance ratchets him up to icon status. No way. Just because I'm mad at Cap doesn't mean I'm going to help you stab him in the back. At my table, Naomi leaned over and dabbed delicately at a ketchup smear on the side of Cap's mouth. I almost upchucked. Will you look at that? Hugh had been watching too, his face twisted with distaste. He said, "To be continued." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," he muttered, not quite meeting my eyes. "What do you need me to do?" I shrugged. "Simple. The whole school thinks he's immortal. We just have to show them they're wrong." Okay, and chapter 20 today is back to Capricorn Anderson's point of view. I don't remember exactly when I stopped keeping count of how many people's names I knew. It was somewhere in the 300s, and the total had to be even higher now. The yearbooks made the biggest difference. I look at those little black and white pictures, and suddenly an image of someone I'd seen around school would pop into my head, and poof, I'd know another student. I was kind of lagging behind on the sixth graders because they weren't in the C average yearbook. But Mrs. Donnelly had the elementary books as well, and they were there, the graduating fifth grade class. Rain would be proud. I used the memory technique she had learned from a college professor who'd passed through Garland in the early 70s. You find a connection between the name and something about the person. For example, Monique rhymes with streak, and she had a blonde streak in her dark hair. Daryl was built like a huge barrel, but sometimes I had to be a little more creative. Seventh grade Ron had a birthmark shaped like a crab, which made me think of the crab nebula. Astronomy. It sounds difficult, but once your brain is used to working that way, it happens almost automatically. For someone who grew up knowing only one person, suddenly knowing hundreds of them was a little intimidating, but I had to admit, it was kind of wonderful too. In Sophie's opinion, studying old yearbooks was just another reason why I had to get a life. Of all the things she said to me, this was maybe the most baffling. How could I get a life when I was obviously already alive? We were seeing less and less of each other, despite the fact that we were in the same house. Sophie's driving test was in a week, so she never passed up a chance to practice with her mother. And she wasn't watching TV with me anymore because Trigonometry and Tears had gone into reruns, which meant they were showing old stories that we had already seen. I thought it was fantastic because it gave you another chance to notice things you might have missed the first time around. She rolled her eyes at me. "We just saw this episode 2 weeks ago. LaShonda flunks home ec and gets caught lending Troy's Letterman jacket to that college guy she's been dating on the side." I wish she hadn't said that because I wanted to be surprised again, even though I knew it was going to happen. But she'd been fairly upbeat lately. She was excited about her road test and so happy with her bracelet. I was thrilled that I'd been able to do that for her. The best thing about being 8th grade president was definitely the checks Mr. Kasigi had given me. It was funny. A money-obsessed world was the main reason Rain had dropped out and formed Garland. Yet in my experience, money was really excellent, and every time I spent it, someone ended up smiling. I was planning to mention it to Rain the next time I spoke with her on the telephone. Money could help hospitals and disaster victims and starving orphans. What was so terrible about it? Thanks to Mr. Kasiji's checks, I was in a position to lend a hand. It was everything she had taught me to believe in. Mr. Kasiji would be back from his conference next week. I couldn't wait to show him how good I'd been at using the money. Also, I needed some more checks. The first batch were almost finished. He was going to be impressed. C Average Middle School had 3 lunch periods of 45 minutes each. On Wednesday, classes were canceled during that 2-hour block so everyone could go to the football field. Hugh explained it to me. It's a pep rally. Pep? I repeated. You know, cheering, excitement, rah, rah, rah. The whole school gets together to watch the players bonk helmets and beat their chests. And that takes 2 hours? I queried. I was getting better at understanding school customs, but this one didn't make much sense to me. Not really, Hugh admitted. Most of that time is getting everybody in and out again. But it's pretty intense. We play Rhinecliff on Saturday, and they're our biggest rivals. Over what? Football, of course. And as the 8th grade president, you have an important role. Rain and I weren't sports fans, what with the obsession over winning and losing, but I couldn't disappoint everybody after they'd made me feel so welcome. I followed Hugh into the mass migration of students heading out of the building at 11:15. We were a noisy procession with horns and cowbells and exciting voices chanting rhyming cheers. It was hard not to be swept up in it, even though I wasn't sure what it was about. So much of school was like that, more feeling than anything of substance. "What's my part in all this?" I asked Hugh. He led me away from the crowd, thundering onto the metal bleachers and into a low hut marked locker rooms. We slipped through the door that said visitors. Hugh plucked a set of large pads off the wall hook and placed them on my shoulders. "You're going to be out there with the team." I was alarmed. I don't know how to do football." "Don't worry," he soothed. It's It isn't a game. You just have to show your support for the team. As if on cue, the PA system crackled to life. Faculty and students, give it up for our very own Claveridge Condors! Running feet clattered in the hall outside. The field exploded with cheers. Even more deafening was the metallic boom of thousands of feet on the bleachers. A band was playing, but it was barely audible over the crowd noise. Am I late? I asked anxiously. No, he replied. You're going to be right on time. He used a yellow football jersey over my head and began tucking my hair under a matching helmet. Maybe I need a bigger hat, I suggested. Maybe you need a haircut, he countered, cramming the bulky headgear into place. A face guard lowered itself into my field of vision. I felt like I was peering out from behind a fence. Is that really necessary? I asked. Definitely. For an instant, I thought he looked kind of sad. I was concerned. Is everything okay? When is everything ever okay with me? He complained. Now get out there and make the school proud. He pointed me through the doorway, which led down a concrete tunnel and onto the field. The crowd noise swelled into a deafening crescendo. But you know how cheers sound friendly? This was different. Angrier. Mean, even. I scanned the bleachers and saw a sea of hostile faces staring straight at me. But I was here to support our team. I started walking toward the players just as they started toward me, and began to pick up speed. I could feel the ground shake as they reached full on stampede. It was then I made a startling discovery. They were all dressed in football uniforms like I was, but their jerseys were blue and red, not yellow like mine. I peered down at my chest and read, upside down, a single word. Rhinecliff. Why was I dressed as the other team? Tune in tomorrow to find out why.